I am Wilhelm Helsingius, and I have psychology and cognitive psychotherapy degrees. Welcome to episode 15 of the Love Unconditionally Handbook. It's a joy to have you with me. Let's keep exploring what love and being loving can mean in everyday life and in a romantic relationship. And while we do, let's take a moment to return to what's most essential. I know something about the quiet weight, the pain, the loneliness, the helplessness, and the challenges that many people carry in their relationships. How often do we ask ourselves, is this really how it's meant to be? Why is it so difficult to stay in the good, to keep the connection alive? Why do we keep falling into the same painful patterns, the same conflicts, the same misunderstandings, even when we genuinely mean well? Why can't we seem to find a way of being or communicating that creates resonance and understanding, instead of distance, insecurity, pain, loneliness, and obstacles? Maybe you've asked yourself, is it me? Is it us? Can anything truly change, deeply and for real? If you've ever carried those questions, even silently, without sharing them, then I want to say this: I understand. Truly. Being in a relationship is one of the most complex, demanding, and emotionally charged experiences we can go through as human beings. And yet, strangely enough, it's the one area of life where we're expected to somehow handle it all, without guidance, without support, without preparation, and often without even the language to describe what we're experiencing, feeling, or needing. We learn how to walk, ride a bike, sit still, be quiet, and behave. We learn how to succeed in our careers, how to be assertive, how to stand our ground. But no one gives us a map or a manual for how to love through conflict, through difference, through fatigue, through physical or emotional struggles, through trauma, wounds, and fear. And meanwhile, our minds produce an endless stream of thoughts, not all of which are helpful. In fact, many can make things even harder. And nearly all of us carry painful experiences that continue to affect us, often without us even realizing it. No one tells us that the difficulties we face in a relationship are not signs that we're failing, or that we're not enough, but rather, they're often signs of caring, of helplessness, and of an honest attempt to survive and make sense of things, even when we're afraid or feeling lost and inadequate. So what follows here is not a quick fix. It's not a drive-through solution. It's not a checklist that frees you from the deeper work of possibly having to question who you believe yourself to be and how you've learned to function, respond, and relate. What I offer here is a quiet gift, a guide, a path, an invitation. A way of approaching what you and your partner are going through. Something to explore, together. It's not everything, far from it, but it is, in my experience, among the most meaningful and relevant things you can begin with. Because it may give you a better chance of turning your current situation into something more grounded, more mutual, more secure, more alive, and ultimately, more meaningful. helplessness and the ego, and the quiet strength of vulnerability. Your ego sees certain things as dangerous. Vulnerability, emotional openness, helplessness, and unconditional love. But what the ego sees as threats are often the very things your deeper self is longing for. The very things that allow for closeness, healing, and growth inside a relationship. On physical intimacy and emotional connection. You might take a moment to reflect. What is the quality of the physical closeness in your relationship? Have you asked yourself what might be affecting it, not just how often it happens, but the depth of it? When was the last time you asked your partner if you had hurt or disappointed them without meaning to? It's easy to hurt the people we love without realizing it. And what about you? When was the last time you felt hurt and maybe didn't speak it aloud? How did it shape the space between you? I believe that one of the most overlooked reasons physical intimacy fades in a relationship is unspoken, unprocessed resentment. Anger that hides beneath the surface. Tiny fractures we never looked at closely and never allowed to heal. Vulnerability in intimacy. Real intimacy, gentle, open, embodied, is not about performance. It's about presence. And presence requires courage. The courage to feel what's there. To notice the walls. To let the disappointments, the silence, the longing, the wounds, be acknowledged. When you make space for your partner to feel seen, truly seen. When they feel heard, valued, and cared for in ways that are genuine. Your emotional bond strengthens. And when emotional connection deepens, physical intimacy tends to return naturally, in its own time. Not forced. Not demanded. But offered. If you can also share new experiences, especially ones that require openness or stepping into the unknown, you give that connection room to grow even more. Because intimacy lives in discovery, and discovery requires vulnerability. Self-reflection and choosing a partner. Another place to pause. When was the last time you reflected on what kind of partner you are? How do you approach the building of a deep, meaningful relationship? Are you carrying beliefs that create barriers, like the idea that there is only one right person for you? Are you waiting to find them? Or becoming someone who is ready to meet them? It's important to remember, your partner may influence up to 90% of the joy and difficulty you experience in daily life. But that doesn't mean you are off the hook. You still hold full responsibility for how you contribute, for the connection you co-create, moment by moment. The quality of your relationship is the quality of your life. And the true strength of a relationship isn't seen when everything is smooth, but when things are hard. When there's fear, or silence, or tension. How you move through those moments together tells the real story. Becoming the right one instead of searching for them. Instead of asking, "Who is right for me?" try asking, "Who do I want to be? What do I have to offer, not just in my words, but in my being? What have I developed within myself that could make love sustainable, trustworthy, alive?" When I ask people what they believe their responsibility is in creating a healthy, loving relationship, most speak about the other person. They tell me what they want, what they don't want, what they expect, what they feel they're entitled to. Very few talk about what they themselves are shaping, refining, growing into. Not just for their own sake, but so that they can become someone their partner can trust. Because real love isn't a contract. It's not a transaction. It's about mutuality and the willingness to become something real in relation to someone else. Someone who is unique, complex, and full of needs, just like you. So I ask you, what do you have to give? Not just when things are good, but when they're uncertain. When you don't feel seen. When you're not getting exactly what you want. What inside you can remain kind, consistent, and trustworthy. Not as a strategy, but as a way of being. What have you worked on, not just for personal growth, but because you want to be someone another person can rest in, lean into, believe in? In fairy tales, the hero usually has to face a monster before they can reach the one they love. Could your monster be the ego? The image of who you think you are? The part of you that believes that getting is more important than giving without condition? And if so, what might happen if you turn to face it, not to destroy it, but to gently lay the rope down? There's a part of you that believes it's not safe to give, not until you've received what you think you need. A part that holds back. That protects. That quietly says, don't risk it. Not yet. It's the part that keeps you from leaning in with your heart open. The part that chooses control over surrender. Fear over love. Instead, it clings to a role, to an identity, to a sense of safety that's more about survival than connection. It defends the image of who you think you have to be, even if that image is no longer true. Even if it keeps you at a distance from yourself and from the one you love. But what if you could receive more, not by holding back, but by showing up as who you truly are? What if the real safety comes not from guarding yourself, but from being deeply seen? What if vulnerability isn't the risk you thought it was, but the doorway to everything you long for? To give, to love, to open, without turning it into a transaction. not if you get something in return, but simply because that's who you are and what love naturally does. Maybe the point was never to find the perfect person. Maybe the real invitation is to soften the ego's demands. A connection that isn't about performance, but about presence. A relationship that offers you more than you ever dared to ask for. And a life filled with meaning you never knew was possible. The influence of your past. Ask yourself, what shaped the way I see relationships? What kind of relationship did my parents have? What patterns or values did I inherit, not just from what they said, but from how they lived? So much of what we believe about love begins before we have words for it. Are you easy to live with? It's a tender question, but an important one. Would you say you're easy to live with? Do you know your own difficult sides? The habits, reactions, or traits that might be hard for someone else to carry. The places where you shut down, lash out, withdraw, or resist. If nothing comes to mind, pause. Not to judge yourself, but to look more gently and honestly. Because if you can't see your edges, you may struggle to understand your deeper emotional needs. And it becomes harder to create the connection you long for. Choosing a partner. Why did you choose your current partner? Did you follow your feelings, or did you also reflect on how well you truly match? What does your future look like when you picture it together? Who do you become in their presence? Do you feel safe, deeply, unconditionally? Seen, heard, understood? Does your partner take real interest in your inner world? Do they care for your emotional experience, not just in words, but in actions? Do you share core values, life goals, a sense of direction? These questions aren't meant to create doubt, but to help you listen more clearly to what's true. Avoiding familiar but unhealthy patterns. Sometimes, what feels good isn't necessarily good for you. Why? Because we don't just choose partners with our hearts. We choose with our history. Something can feel right simply because it feels familiar. And what's familiar isn't always safe or healthy. For example, if your mother was emotionally distant, you might find yourself drawn to someone who is also hard to reach. Not because it feels good, but because it feels known. If your father dealt with his anger through aggression, you may end up in a relationship with a partner who acts out in similar ways. Even if part of you longs for something entirely different. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped in it. And that's where change begins. Choosing a partner isn't just about how you feel in the moment. It's also about something deeper, a kind of quiet awareness. An ability to notice not just what draws you in, but why it does. And what kind of future that connection might actually support. But I won't go too deeply into that here. This isn't a book of psychological theory. It's a guide for real life. For your everyday experiences, your quiet questions, and the patterns you live with when no one else is watching. So instead, I'll invite you to pause and ask yourself, do I tend to be drawn to people who remind me of my parents in energy, tone, or emotional availability? What truly guides my choice of a partner? Could it be helpful to stay open, to keep exploring a connection, even if the other person doesn't fully match the checklist I've used before? How much of my choice is based on habit, on surface feelings, on assumptions I've never questioned? And who am I, who do I become, in this person's presence? Am I someone I genuinely enjoy being? Having a relationship mentor. Have you ever considered the idea of having a guide for your relationship? Not just a therapist or expert, but someone you trust, someone who sees you clearly and can help you grow where it matters most. Who could that person be for you? Could it even be your partner? Would you dare to let them be your teacher sometimes, not because they have all the answers, but because they see parts of you that you might miss? Could you ask for their help? In the moments when you feel lost, overwhelmed, or unsure. Loving and handling conflict. Can you truly love someone and still act out, criticize, or withdraw when they don't meet your expectations? If your love disappears the moment things get hard. If it fades when your ego feels neglected, then maybe what you're offering isn't love. Maybe it's a transaction. Love isn't something you give only when your needs are met. It's something deeper. Something that holds steady, even when you're not getting what you want. You're right, it means you might have to wait. To pause. To hold your discomfort, instead of reacting from it. Love is choosing to stay connected. Especially when it's inconvenient. Loving without losing yourself. To love someone fully doesn't mean disappearing into them. It doesn't mean forgetting yourself. It means learning how to stay kind to them and to you. Because if you treat yourself with care, it becomes easier to offer that same care to someone else. And the reverse is also true. If you offer gentleness to your partner, not to be praised, not to earn something, but simply because it's true in you, that energy begins to flow both ways. Whatever you give from the heart, you are also giving to yourself. even if you don't notice it at first. Relationships and our mental programming, the Part 1. Before we continue, there's something I want to say. You might notice that certain themes return, sometimes more than once. And that's not an accident. I know it can feel repetitive, but repetition has a purpose. In my experience, only a small number of people truly integrate these insights. Not just intellectually, but in a way that changes how they live, feel, and relate. So I return to these truths gently. Not because you've forgotten, but because they matter. And because they can open something in you, something that may have been closed for a long time. It might be helpful for you to know this. Maybe only 1 in 10,000 people truly understands what I'm speaking about here, not just in theory, but in a way that changes how they actually live, feel, and relate in everyday life. So if you're still finding your way, if you need time, you're not alone. You're not the only one who needs space and time to grow into this, to really begin seeing what this way of relating means, and to experience all that becomes possible when you start living from that place. I want to begin with the perspective of Anthony de Mello, a spiritual teacher, psychotherapist, and speaker. Buddha once said, "Life is full of suffering. Desire is the root of suffering. Suffering ends when desire ceases." De Mello echoes this in his own way. He suggests that our suffering doesn't come from the world, but from our deep attachment to how we think things should be. Desires are natural, even healthy. But when your peace of mind becomes tied to whether those desires are fulfilled, you begin to suffer. Not because you want too much, but because your happiness starts depending on outcomes you can't control. We've been conditioned to believe that we must get what we want, for life to go the way we want, that we can't be okay unless it does. But that belief, that rigid dependency, is what makes us fragile. Real freedom begins when you no longer need everything to go right in order to feel at peace. De Mello asks a powerful question. What's the value of traveling the world? Having a beautiful home, a successful career, a nice car, if your heart feels empty, if you're anxious, disconnected, or aching for real love? He reminds us, none of these outer things can sustain you if your inner world is still shaped by fear, control, or longing for validation. If your sense of worth still depends on others acting the way you need them to, you'll never feel truly safe. Not even in your best moments. So what helps? Psychological flexibility. Not giving up on what you long for, but loosening your grip. Being able to stay grounded even when life doesn't meet your expectations. Still wanting, still caring, but not losing yourself when things don't go your way. De Mello shares a story. A man was told he had 6 months to live. When a priest came to visit and asked how he was doing, the man smiled and said, "These have been the happiest 6 months of my life. Before, I felt I had wasted so much time. But when the doctor gave me the news, something shifted. I stopped worrying. I stopped trying to control everything. I let go of hope, and with it, I found peace. This became the best time of my life. Because I believed the doctor." There's something in that story that stays with you. Not because it's extreme, but because it speaks to something we all carry. The weight of control. The fear of uncertainty. The belief that we must do more in order to be okay. But what if the opposite is true? You don't have to worry. Not in the way you've been taught. But getting to that place, where worry no longer runs your life, takes time. It takes practice. And kindness toward yourself along the way. There's no deadline. No test to pass. The more you notice your inner programming, the quiet rules you were given, often without words, the more space you create to choose something else. Not out of force, but out of awareness. So if you feel stuck, alone, reactive, or lost, you haven't failed. You're not broken. You're simply living out beliefs that were handed to you. Beliefs about love. About safety. About what it means to be enough. These old rules were meant to help you survive, but they may be the very thing standing in the way of the love, connection, and peace you long for now. And that's not your fault. But it is something you can begin to change. Honestly. And one moment at a time. Are relationships difficult? Do you ever find yourself wondering why relationships, especially romantic ones, can feel so difficult? If your answer is yes, you're not alone. But instead of rushing to fix or explain, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what kind of situations tend to feel hard for me? And why do those particular moments affect me so deeply? Anthony de Mello suggested something that may feel surprising at first. That the greatest difficulty in our relationships isn't really the other person, but our own mental programming. If your partner says something harsh or loses their temper, does that have to upset you? His answer is no. Not because it isn't painful, but because pain and suffering aren't the same thing. To suffer, we usually have to hold on. To make it personal, as it would threaten us. So the real question becomes, why do we hold on to what hurts us? Why do we give so much of our inner peace away? Handing someone else the power to decide how we feel inside? It's not weakness. And it's not your fault. It's your programming. A set of learned patterns that taught you to respond this way, often without you even noticing. De Mello doesn't say we should fight this programming or force ourselves to change. Instead, he invites us to simply observe, to see it clearly. Because when you see it without judgment, something in it begins to soften. Its grip weakens, and you begin to return to yourself. If someone treats you unfairly, you're allowed to act. You can set boundaries, speak your truth, stand your ground. But let the action come from clarity, not from a wounded ego. There's a strength in knowing the difference between defending your dignity and reacting out of hurt or pride. Be curious about the thoughts that arise in you. Do you ever hear an inner voice saying, "He's wrong. If only she would change. If they just acted differently, everything would be fine." We've all been there. It's human. But those thoughts often point outward, when what we really long for is something inward. Understanding, connection, peace. So ask yourself gently, do I spend energy trying to change my partner? My friend? My child? My coworker? What if, instead of trying to fix them, you shifted your focus toward understanding both them and yourself? Not to accept everything without limits, but to build a deeper connection. To come closer, both to them, and to something inside you that wants to heal. Because in the end, it's not the other person who creates your suffering. It's not their words or choices that truly control how you feel. It's the old programming. And once you begin to see it, really see it, you're no longer trapped inside it. And that changes everything. Thank you for listening all the way to the end of this episode. If you found anything in this episode interesting or helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you clicked the like button and shared a few words about your thoughts on the content of this handbook. Most importantly, it helps others find this as well.